We are back on this Wednesday, Sports Take, JAKIB Sports YouTube Network. Let's head down to the NovaCare complex, where it is going to be a fascinating day, to say the least, as the locker rooms are cleared out and the exit interviews begin. And we are joined by our guy, Jeff Kerr. Jeff does an amazing job covering not only the Eagles, but the NFL for CBS Sports. And you can follow him on Twitter at Jeff Kerr CBS. Jeff, first off, welcome, man. I want to start with this. I know you just arrived maybe half hour ago, whatever it was. Any sense what kind of where things are right now? We're told that Jeffrey and Howie are going to be meeting with Nick. Kind of where things are in your estimation?
You know what? Your guess is as good as mine, guys. I got to be honest with you. I have no idea what they're going to do. They're not speaking today, so that's going to be huge. I mean, last year they did not do that as well. They waited till a couple days later. So I have a feeling I'm going to be back here again when they do speak at the end of the year. But I still think they're contemplating things out. I said after yesterday it was going to be about 48 to 72 hours. I'm going to stick by that.
Yeah, Jeff,
that's right. Yep.
Yeah. This whole thing is really something. It's really a spectacle because, you look at the way this team performed just from an effort standpoint, and you say, wow, where's their player accountability? But then you also got to say, wow, Nick Sirianni, how are you not able to get these guys ready and prepared, week in and week out, especially in such a large sample size? It was a tale of two seasons. I asked our guy Mike Sealski this question earlier, and now I'm going to ask you, when you look at how this season kind of transpired, especially in the second half, how much do you lend towards player accountability and how much do you lend towards coaching accountability? How do you balance those two competing thoughts?
Yeah, that's a good question, Tone, because honestly, I've been back and forth on this. I've been blaming the coaches. I've been blaming the players. And honestly, everybody's to blame, right? So I blame the coaching accountability. And maybe this is just me being the coach myself. What did you do to get them out of this? And I don't think they did anything. The only major change they made the team worse, and that was change the defensive play caller, which in hindsight, and it wasn't a good decision. And in the back of my mind at the time, I didn't write about it, but I said, this is probably going to backfire on them because you got to change everything up in the defense. You got to change the philosophy. So that didn't work. I don't know what they were doing on offense the last 6-7 weeks. I mean, when you're hearing from professional athletes, current and former, guys on the Manning cast, all over the place saying it's a high school offense, that's very concerning to me. So were they trying to simplify the game too much? Were they trying to be, trying to outperform their limitations here? Because I was trying to tell the guys on Birds 365 yesterday, look, we can blame the offense all we want here, but they really weren't as deep as people thought they were. And you saw that when A.J. Brown was gone.
Yeah. Well, here's the disconnect for me, Jeff. If we're to believe that Nick Sirianni is scheming this thing up, and he was scheming it up last year, and I get it. Maybe it's just Shane Steichen was a wizard game day, that could be the answer. It could be that simple. But how does it look so unprepared from one year to the next if the same architect is designing it? How?
Yeah, I think that's one of the questions we need to answer. How was it this bad? How did it get to be so bad? Did the quarterback, what happened with Jalen Hurts? All of a sudden, he turned the football over a lot. Then he wasn't turning the football over late, but he was making bad plays, bad decisions. And I mean, you guys saw on the blitz on what was it, the first drive? I still haven't really rewatched the game yet. But on the first drive, you have two guys going on, one guy going on out route, one guy going deep on the blitz. It's like, seriously, this is what they're going to do here? Or, the one time they do go across the middle, they get 30-some yards to Devonta Smith. So I think this offense really relied on the big play this year. And we just didn't see the big plays much after week 3. Wouldn't you guys agree with that?
Agreed.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny. Hurts in his press conference after the game, it was telling. And it was kind of more so about what he didn't say rather than what he did say. And, he was asked straight up, do you want Nick Sirianni back? And he was very coy and vague about it. That's on brand for him. But again, Jalen Hurts, very calculated, very meticulous, doesn't waste words. He typically means what he says. And for him, you got to pay attention to what he doesn't say. Did it stand out to you that he didn't necessarily outright back Sirianni, especially when we see guys like Dak Prescott. Rob brought this up earlier. Dak Prescott had his best year of his career under Mike McCarthy. He went out his way to make sure Mike McCarthy got the love he deserved. We didn't see that with Jalen Hurts. How are you measuring that? How are you diagnosing Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni's relationship? Does Nick Sirianni's future hinge solely on what Jalen Hurts wants at this point?
Yeah, I didn't like Jalen Hurts' answer there. It's okay. I have the confidence of everybody in this building. Well, okay, that was a typical Jalen Hurts answer, but to me, I'm like, well, way to step up for your coach there, Jalen.
Well, and he was being asked specifically, Jeff, about Nick, not everybody. Like, you couldn't at least give a little bit of like, hey, of course I have confidence in Nick. I have confidence in everybody, or whatever. No, you know.
Yeah, and I like how he just kind of ignored Jeff McClain there when. That was a great question by Jeff, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And, Jeff followed up with it. Like, you tell me you didn't know, like, your coach is on the hot seat? Like, come on. Like,
yeah.
Those guys know. They hear this stuff. Jalen Hurts probably goes on Twitter just as much as I do at this point. It's, I just did not like the answer. I was not a fan of it. That's your franchise quarterback. And again, Tony, like you mentioned, Dak Prescott did like a 5-paragraph thing on why Mike McCarthy should be back as Cowboys head coach. And he just got blown out in the wild card round, just like the Eagles did. It's like, are you not happy with what's going on? Like, he does know if Nick Sirianni's gone, Brian Johnson's gone too, or maybe he's not happy with him. Who knows?
Right. And, real quick, if I can follow up, Rob, that begs the question, for him not to go out his way and defend him. Even A.J. Brown went out his way to defend him, right? With the whole penalty, deep ball in Seattle, that kind of thing. For him not to go out of his way to just quell or just, try to put the flames out when it comes to Nick Sirianni, it says a lot. And it says to me that I don't think he believes, and I want to get your perspective on this, I don't think he believes Nick Sirianni is the guy to help get him to the next level. And I'm curious to know, how do you react when you hear that?
Yeah. Even if he thinks it on the field, look at the off-field stuff, like Nick Sirianni with the Chiefs. When do you ever see Jalen Hurts just disrespect an opponent? Think about that. It's a different culture. Like, Jalen is the same even-keel guy, it seems like, every single time. It's, he's not going to crack. He's not going to be giving, an FU, or he's not going to rub it in your face. He's just not going to do that. And Nick's kind of the rah-rah guy, the fired-up guy, but my biggest concern with Nick is whether Jalen thinks he's the guy or not, was the message getting across to these guys. I wrote a story after the Giants game, and, it's pretty bad when I'm sitting there at MetLife Stadium kind of rolling my eyes at stuff Nick is saying. I'm like, if I'm doing this, what's someone who's actually playing for him doing? Yeah. Again, this is probably where my coach stuff coming is. Every time I make a speech to kids, I'm always looking to see if they're paying attention or not. It's like the number one thing.
Yeah. And look, I do think there's a question about his emotional, status, if you will. But you laid it out, I thought, very well, Jeff. You threw a tweet out yesterday regarding the Eagles offense over the last 7 games, and that included the playoff game Monday night. All right. So offensively, 16.9 points per game, which is 26th. 26th with that offense. Yards per game, 19th. Yards per play, 15th. Time of possession, 29th. Rushing yards per game, 18th. Passing yards per game, 16th. Third down percentage, which they were great at early in the year. They're down to 7th now. Red zone percentage has been a roller coaster, bad, good, bad. But they finished, in those 7 games, 21st. Turnovers tied for 30th. Like, this is across the board. Horrendous, Jeff. Horrendous across the board.
Yeah, we do know who's on this team, right? It's Jalen Hurts, the runner-up for MVP last year. A.J. Brown, the only receiver ever to have back-to-back 1,400-yard seasons for this franchise. Dallas Goedert, Devonta Smith. We saw how good Devonta Smith is when he's the primary guy. He's a stud. So, and remember, you had A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith all those times. You still had 3 Pro Bowl offensive linemen. You got the best center in the game. You got arguably the best right tackle in the game. Jordan Mailata's really good. Liam Dickerson's really good. Cam Jurgens may be the weak spot, but it's not that big of a weak spot, right? It's look at all the talent on that offense, and that was it. When I saw those numbers, I was shocked, and I made sure to omit Sidney Brown's touchdown in there because remember, it was 18. but you take away Sidney Brown's pick 6,
Right.
it's 16. So that's really bad by this team. And look, I keep telling people changes are going to be made here, and there will be changes made. It's just unacceptable. Like, everybody knows how bad the defense has been, but I think that's part of why the offense struggled too. They knew they had to go score on every single drive to win a football game. They couldn't even get 20 yards.
And I think that's the real indictment on Nick Sirianni, the fact that you have all this talent on your side of the ball. You're an offensive guy, and you're struggling to get the most out of those guys. I think that's the largest indictment. And we have to ask ourselves, what leg does Sirianni have to stand on in these conversations with Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie that are definitely looming? I mean, look, we got to be honest. They're definitely considering a change. And I'm curious to know, in your opinion, how does Nick Sirianni approach these conversations, and how do you think these conversations are going to go in terms of what they expect from him, what he would like to do, what they want to do, what the future is? How do you think those conversations are going to get handled going forward?
You know, Tone, I know the Eagles' philosophy is pass the score, run the win. And it's a great philosophy. It's what everybody in the NFL does. But if I'm Nick Sirianni, I'm going in there and I'm telling these guys, look, I did not have enough at running back this year. And remember, you had DeAndre Swift having 1,000-yard season, but when I'm looking at like the advanced numbers, and people can argue with me all they want here, when you are dead last in yards after contact the last 7 games, they go, well, that's Jalen Hurts. That's a tush push. No, it's a little more than that. It's DeAndre Swift and Kenny Gainwell got hit and they went down. That, you know, and by the way, you were 3rd in yards before contact. So you're getting the holes. Someone's not hitting them. Maybe they need a more straight line runner there. And again, I still think DeAndre Swift should be back. I just don't know if they're going to do that because that's just not their MO. So I would like to just see someone paired better with DeAndre Swift going forward with this team. Oh, by the way, you didn't give him the ball enough in the passing game either. I know he had 4 catches, but they were in garbage time. So I just did not like what was there at running back all season long, and it bit them. I think this is a team that I think Nick needs good running backs for his offense to work. And when you can't run the ball, you can't do anything. So that's just my non-watching film, just watching all the games, just seeing what I'm seeing when I'm watching the offensive line type thing. And, you know, with the numbers to back it up, it's unfortunate, Tone.
Jeff, let me go to the defensive side. How concerned should we be with Jordan Davis and Nolan Smith? I'll ask you about those 2 guys specifically. You're talking about 2 first-rounders, 2 guys both out of Georgia. Jordan Davis flashed early, very, very quiet late. Nothing really all season from Nolan Smith. What's the concern level there with those guys?
Yeah, Nolan Smith I'm not concerned about because, you know, most rookie DNs, they don't make much of an impact. I mean, look at Brandon Graham. We were probably having this conversation about Brandon Graham back in 2010, and look how he turned out. And I thought Nolan Smith played really well in the playoff game, by the way. I have nothing but good things to say about all those edge rushers in that playoff game. They showed up. Some of the defensive tackles did too, obviously, Fletcher Cox and Mel Williams. But, yeah, I am a little concerned about Jordan Davis. But, again, I like Jordan Davis, the player. I think Jordan Davis, the player, it's going to take some time for him to get better. I just think we're going to look at this pick down the line when we see what Kyle Hamilton's doing in Baltimore. By the way, I'm going to be in Baltimore on Saturday, so I'll get to watch him firsthand for the first time since college. And you got a difference maker at safety. You don't have a difference maker at safety in Philadelphia, and you probably just had not a run-of-the-mill defensive tackle, but just a guy. And is just a guy good enough? Can that just the guy replace Fletcher Cox? Can he help out Jalen Carter? That's what I'm concerned about. You know,
that's the thing. They have a lot of decisions looming just on not just with the coaching staff, but also the roster. You know, I was looking at some guys that they could potentially lose over the next couple seasons. Hassan Reddick is coming up. Josh Sweat is coming up. Avonte Maddox, his contract is coming up. You know, there's a Fletcher Cox. Will he come back? What's his future in Philadelphia? They're going to have some contracts that they have to worry about as well on the rookie side of things. But you know, in this upcoming offseason, Jeff, where do you think, or how do you think they will approach it? Do you think they're waiting to figure out what their first move will be after they figure out the coaching situation? Because if you bring in a new head coach, obviously the philosophy's changed. So, just how do you think they're going to approach trying to retool reload or even rebuild this defense. I think they should blow it up. But what do you think?
Well, I think you have to blow it up, right, Tone? I mean, when you're 30th or lower in pretty much every major statistical category since week 9, I think that justifies blowing it up. But look, I wouldn't get rid of a Brandon Graham. Fletcher Cox is going to be tough. Depends on the contract. I mean, I know Cox has even thought about retirement. So we'll see. But I mean, I don't think he's going to. I think he's been too productive of a player to do that. I would bring him back, honestly. I think he's a good leader for them. Same with Brandon Graham. A lot of the younger guys respect these two. And I think that's huge for a locker room going forward. So I bring them back. Really anybody in the core 4, I think they should come back. If Jason Kelce wants to come back, obviously you let him. BG wants to be here for year 15. Let him have it. He was productive this year for how limited they played him. But yeah, I agree. You definitely need to revamp linebacker. You need to revamp cornerback. You need to revamp safety, defensive tackle. I think you have what you have, which there's nothing wrong with that. You bring back Fletcher Cox. I think you'll live with him, Milton Williams, Jalen Carter, and Jordan Davis, right? Because you have to assume Carter's going to get better. And I would assume Davis is going to get better, even though he faded the second half of the year. But everything else, I think, is fair game at this point.
Jeff, let me ask you about the hiring. If Nick Sirianni is shown the door, would they step out of character and hire a coach with previous NFL head coaching experience?
Last time they did that, it was Joe Kuharczyk, right?
Yeah, which means it's been a real friggin' long time. Yes.
Yeah, it has. And you know what? That didn't work out too well, as we all know.
Far from it. My father growing up would use that name in vain like a curse word, Kuharczyk. So
my theory on the whole snowballs at Santa Claus thing was because they were trying to throw a Joe Kuharczyk and they missed.
Yes, Joe must go. Yes.
Yeah, Joe must go. So I mean, yeah, it would be out of character for them. They always seem to go for these under the radar type hires, and the guy I like a lot is Bobby Slowick. I don't know if he's considered under the radar anymore because of what he did with CJ Stroud, that offense this year. But it would be nice to have an offense coordinator, a head coach that can get his receivers some separation, which you thought Nick Sirianni was able to do, coming from a receiver background himself. But look at what Slowick did with Brock Purdy, with CJ Stroud now. I mean, what can he do with a guy like Jalen Hurts? Possibilities are endless, but if there was a year to get one of these quote-unquote retread head coaches, that would be the time. I mean, I'm not saying Bill Belichick or Mike Vrabel here, but why not give Jim Harbaugh a call? Although I will say this. My only issue with Jim Harbaugh is, and it really goes under the rug because he bolted, who did he really draft that was an impact player on the 49ers until Kyle Shanahan got there?
I'd have to really go back and dig into it.
Yeah, I have to look at that. I've argued with people about him. Like, I think
but he wouldn't be drafting,
question,
right?
Yeah, exactly. He wouldn't be drafting, so that would be the key too. He'd be a football coach. But yeah, I always joke with people. He jumps off the Titanic before it sinks, aka Michigan, aka the 49ers. So I love him here as a coach personally. I love his attitude. I love what he can bring to a locker room. I think he's a guy where the message never gets stale. He obviously can coach. We see that. I mean, Michigan won the freaking national championship. Michigan. Mm-hmm. So think about that for a second. But yeah, I mean, if you have to go the retread, I don't even consider him a retread, to be honest with you. He hasn't been coaching the NFL for almost 10 years now. So it actually has been 10 years. So I mean, that'd be the guy I go with, but I don't want any parts of Belichick, to be honest with you. I just don't think the guy can win without Tom Brady.
Yeah, well, I don't know that they would want those kind of guys who are going to be autonomous. But go ahead, Tom.
No, yeah, because I'm glad you said that, Rob. Because here's the thing, we have one part of we have two sides of this thing, right? We have one people on this side of the line saying that this team will never go against their philosophy and how they view head coaches and hiring a guy with experience, hiring a guy with a backbone that's going to push back on anything Howie or Jeffrey may say. They're never good. There's people on that side of the line, and then you have people on the opposite side saying, "Well, look, you've done it your way for X amount of years. Something has to give. Something has to change. Somebody has to step out of character. Someone has to shake it up in some ways, in some shape, way, or form." And I'm always battling between those two things because, as a fan of the team, I want to remain optimistic, but also just understanding how they've done business for the past decades. It's kind of hard for me to bet on them going against the grain and bringing in a guy like Vrabel or a Pete Carroll or whoever you want to name, a guy with any kind of ilk or status. What level of confidence do you have, Jeff, in this organization and Jeffrey Lurie in particular being able to pivot from what they've done, especially when it's yielded 2 Super Bowl appearances and 1 Super Bowl win in 6 years? How confident do you think they are in changing their process?
It all depends what the quarterback thinks, right? But even then, they have full faith in Carson Wentz, and he didn't want to be here, So it's tough, right? This is what makes it difficult for me. This is why I never can speculate with them, because they always could do the opposite of what you think they're going to do. But you also have to look at it as they just don't hire retreads. They don't. Pete Carroll, I know Pete Carroll wants to coach again. I'm sure they'd love to interview. They almost did hire Josh McDaniels. We should put that out there, but they were late in the hiring process too. I just think they're going to go for a first-time guy, a guy that not necessarily they can control. I think that's the word people like to use, but I think it's a guy that isn't going to step on their toes. I just don't think they're going to change their thinking, because in their mindset, we went to 2 Super Bowls in 5 years. We're the only franchise to change the head coach, change the quarterback, and go to a Super Bowl in a 5-year stretch. And I think they know they can build it up as quickly as it can get torn down, as long as they find the right guy. And you really do have to trust them with who they hired. They got Andy Reid right. Early Chip Kelly was right until everything.
It wasn't.
Until it wasn't. Doug Pearson was right. He won a Super Bowl. Nick Sirianni was right. He's the highest win percentage in Eagles history. But, they definitely have an interesting process of how they pick a head coach.
But real quick, if I could follow up, Rob, I think that's the confusing part, right? I know you don't want to use the word control, but then when you say they don't want anyone that's going to step on their toes, there's some level of control there. You want to keep this person at a certain point so they don't have but so much influence in certain areas. I think that's been kind of the downfall of this organization. They've been so lockstep with their process. They're missing the one simple fact that they're not really football guys. And you have guys in suits making football decisions. Granted, they have experience with this team for 30 years, like Jeffrey Lurie and Howie. He's been here since the early 2000s, started low and grinded his way up. But we clearly at this point know Howie Roseman's limitations when it comes to roster building and dealing with the contracts. We know that's his strength, but he has limitations.
And even before Roseman, look at the positions that are weak.
Right.
Rob and I can tell you in 2002, they just decided that, see you, Jeremiah Trotter. We're going to go with Barry Gardner, and we're going to sign Levon Kirkland off the street. And,
that's what
by the way,
I'm saying. Yeah. They have to change how they view it.
I got to get this off my chest, too.
No, please, no. Cook, Jeff. Please cook. I need you to cook.
I got so tired of social media saying, I will never forgive the Philadelphia Eagles for making what could be Jason Kelsey's last game. I'm like, yeah, okay. Try being at the 2003 NFC Championship game at the Vet and then come talk to me. They literally let Tampa Bay close down a stadium for them. So I digress.
I hear you. So let me ask you, just to pick up on the philosophy thing. In your estimation, do you think they just view this as a one-off, that things went south? You were coming off a Super Bowl. Everybody seems to have a rough year coming off a Super Bowl, and nothing to see here. Everything's fine. Or do you think they take a little bit more heart and say, maybe we need to look at things a little bit deeper here that we're doing?
So this was a good point that was brought up to me from a bunch of Tampa Bay writers. I'm friends with a lot of people in the Tampa Bay market, and they were talking about how Tampa Bay was just blowing out the Eagles. And they're like, you ever think maybe the Eagles are just tired because they played all those games last year? Remember, they played 20 games last season. Right. They played the second most games in the NFL over the last 2 years. The Chiefs played the most. And the Chiefs are still going. And the Chiefs are a rarity, right? It's hard for, especially in the NFC, for teams to go back to the Super Bowl the year after they lose it. I don't think it's been done since the Vikings in the 70s.
Yeah.
So maybe that's just it. And I felt that too, just being in the locker room this year. Some of the guys were just tired. It's a long season. It's a long process. And I think Nick tried to do as much as he could to preserve that. But if you keep losing, what are you supposed to do? So maybe guys just got worn out. I mean, I think this year could be a blip on the radar. I mean, there are going to be changes. I still think they're going to be a good football team. They're going to compete in the NFC East next year because they do have the quarterback and they do have the key players. I just really want to know all the stuff I've been hearing from team sources and stuff like that, what actually comes out this offseason.
Do you think Nick survives here? What's your sense here?
I'll go 50-50. I honestly think you got to have that conversation just based on how he wasn't able to get them out of it. And this was supposed to be a Super Bowl team this year, Super Bowl team, Super Bowl expectations. And even when they were 10-1, I think we all knew they weren't as good as a 10-1 team. But look, when you were up 2 games in the NFC, you were up 2 games in the division, you ended up losing both by a game and bowing out in the playoffs to a clearly inferior football team. And that's what I was told by Tampa Bay writers. That was a clearly inferior football team they lost to. You have to consider it.
And I think that's where I am, right? It's when you couple every mishap that's happened and you have Nick Sirianni screaming at the mountaintop that this is his offense, and your offense failed to show up in that playoff game. As bad, even though the defense gave up 32 points, there was a stretch in that game where the defense stringed together about 2 or 3 stops, and the offense couldn't do anything with it.
That game ended when Jalen Hurts took safety.
Agreed.
That's what I said. That's it. That's the game right there.
The moment he took that safety, I'll be honest with you guys. The moment he took that safety, I turned the game off. That was when I knew that game was lost because I didn't even trust them to get in position for a field goal. That's how bad they were. So, you look at Nick Sirianni and you say to yourself, how can he answer for this? How can they allow this man to stay here knowing how bad they looked? Yeah, maybe they were tired, but that just looked so uncharacteristic.
Would you guys live with this if they told Nick, we're picking your coordinators?
Would we live with it?
Yeah.
As in, would I be okay with them making that decision? Or?
I would.
Yes. Because remember, Nick picked these guys this year, and you saw the result.
Yeah, I would.
And Nick didn't pick Shane or Gannon, did he?
He didn't pick Gannon. I don't think he picked Shane. I think John McMullen would know that firsthand, but it did help Nick and Shane have that previous relationship. Same with him and Gannon. But they definitely, the front office definitely picked Gannon.
Okay, I think I would be okay, but I don't. This is where I'm torn, Jeff, because as the head coach, you're supposed to be the main voice, and when the main voice is no longer resonating, how do I justify bringing you back under any circumstance? And that's the scary part for me. I think the Eagles are playing with fire here. If they fire him and they pick a head coach, if you don't pick one of those power 4 guys we mentioned, you're going to have to justify that to the players and to the fan base.
What I wouldn't like, what I wouldn't like, Tone, is every day next year he's going to be on the hot seat.
And that's what I'm not ready for that. I'm personally not ready for that. I would much rather deal with the new coach.
Fans are just going to be waiting to pounce. Like, you're going to have national pundits doing the hot seat thing, and every mistake he makes, see, you should have fired him. It's going to be like that.
Think of what's going on in Dallas right now, right? Yeah. I still say the Cowboys were a really good football team this year, and I stood by that. But I said this team is going to get judged in January because that's when they should be judged. And they laid an absolute egg against Green Bay. And can you imagine Mike McCarthy, all the pressure he's going under, no matter how many, in a way, I feel bad for Dak too, because Dak feels that pressure every single day. It is not good for an organization when the owner just talks and talks and talks every single day, saying they're going to Super Bowl, they're doing this, we're the NFC East chance. No wonder why the guy chokes in the playoffs, if you want to be honest.
Yeah, no, I think you make a good point. All right, so if there is a decision, I think one way or the other, they're either going to say something or put something out through somebody.
So something will happen.
How soon do we know here? We're at Wednesday, Jeff, because there are a lot of candidates out there that could be, grabbed up. Latest Friday?
I would say latest. I would say latest Friday. I definitely think there's going to be something going on at least by the end of the week.
Yeah, okay. and real quick, if I can squeeze this in, if you're Nick Sirianni and you go into those meetings and they tell you, well, we're picking your entire staff, how confident are you in your role to begin with? And at that point, are you even the head coach? Are you just a face in a high place? I mean, it's so many intricacies surrounding this move. Mike Silsky, laid it out best. I think Rob said it as well. They are legitimately at a crossroads that can completely change the trajectory of their organization for the next 5, 10, maybe 15 years.
They are. This is going to be the biggest decision that Jeffrey Lurie has ever made. Bigger than replacing Howie Roseman for Chip Kelly, bigger than going with Doug, bigger than going with Andy, right? Because you were at the lowest of the low when you hired Andy. So this is huge because this is a team that I still think can compete for a Super Bowl next season. They have the pieces in place, at least the core guys, but they got to change some stuff up. And this is going to be the biggest decision, whether he decides to keep Nick Sirianni and pick his coordinators or get rid of Nick Sirianni and have a new voice in there. But I'll tell you what, if this job opens up, I don't care what anybody says, it's a damn good, attractive job for a lot of these candidates that they're all going to be wanting Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman in the interview.
Jeff, well said. Well done, as always.
Always great conversation, Jeff. Always great.
Yeah.
Always tell everybody, man, at Jeff Kerr CBS on Twitter and CBSSports.com is where you can check out Jeff's work. Jeff, always fun, man. Thanks for giving us a couple minutes today. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, absolutely. I keep joking shit's going to hit the fan, but we'll see in about half an hour.
Yeah.
It's coming. It's coming, man.
It's coming. Jeff, thanks, man. Appreciate it, buddy.
Sounds great. Thanks, guys.
All right, you got it. That is Jeff Kerr of CBS Sports. All right, Tone, let's get a quick one in here. We'll come back. We'll continue with the Eagles.
We're 2 for 2, Rob. We're 2 for 2. We're having some great conversations today. I don't know if it's because I took my vitamins. I don't know what's going on, but we're having some great football talk today. Whether if it's under terrible circumstances, I think what we're having here is some real critical thinking level conversations. Yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
I think it's real talk. And I think what we're doing here is really trying to examine what are the issues that have led to this and what needs to be done to fix this is kind of where I'm at with this. And we'll keep it rolling, man. We will keep it rolling when we come back talking Eagles. We'll mix in a little Sixers because they did beat the defending champs last night. And JoJo keeps going off. So we'll get into all those kind of things when we come back. Don't go anywhere. That's Tone to Shields. I'm Rob Ellis. We are Sports Take. Right back.
I remember getting my heart broken when they lost the Super Bowl in 2004. We're big Eagles fans. We moved to South Philly because of the Eagles. When they won, we went straight to Broad Street, and everybody was going nuts over there, and it was just a memory that you'll never forget.